For over 30 years, Dr. Newbury has shared with the Howard Payne family on the last Wednesday of the fall semester a Christmas message. If you're like me, I know you look forward to today, and I'm so looking forward to the message today. I want to thank Dr. Ronnie Marriott, pastor at First Baptist Church Burleson, for opening up your church for us to film this message. And so excited about today. Really appreciate the legacy of Dr. Newbury. You know, he was our 16th president, currently serves as our chancellor, and I'm really grateful that we can continue this tradition by hearing from him this morning.
Hello students, staff, faculty, and friends of Howard Payne. Over the past 50 years, I've had the opportunity more than 100 times to address you folks, usually from the stage at MEMS Auditorium, but that was then and this is now, and COVID was unheard of then and very much heard from now. So there will be many differences today. I've never spoken sitting down. Also, I've rarely used notes. And beyond that, I'm not used to speaking to an audience that is constituted of two people, my wife and daughter, Jeannie, who are going to say I did a great job even if they know better, and certainly I know better. Honored and pleased are still the best words for me to use when I'm talking about Howard Payne University. We are, by the way, adhering to the social distancing requirement. I'm in the auditorium of First Baptist Church in Burleson, Texas, where I work with senior adults. So that's about 130 miles. Divide that by 6 feet, and that's almost 250,000 such segments. So there could be 250,000 people standing 6 feet apart. We should have social distancing down well. As I said, an audience of two is not many. It's not like the 300 or 400 that we often would have it in Howard Payne. Here are my wife Brenda, wife of 54 years, Jeannie McDaniel, our youngest daughter, who is a proud graduate of Howard Payne, as are her sister Jana, who lives in Tyler, and her late sister Julie, who also attended Howard Payne and died suddenly in August of 2020 at age 50. I'll speak more about her later. Early in my presidency here, I was handed a copy of The Littlest Jingle Bell by Dwayne Bruner, a longtime Howard Payne University trustee and a wonderful friend of the university. I first read The Littlest Jingle Bell in chapel in the late 1980s and have done so annually or almost annually for some 3 decades. Many of you are watching, perhaps to make sure if I can still read from the printed page. I will read it at this time, but kindly ask you to stay tuned for a few more minutes following the recitation. Herewith is the 2020 reading of The Littlest Jingle Bell. Once there was a toy store that sold jingle bells. There were big loud ones that went jingle jingle. There were medium-sized ones that went jingle jingle. And there was a little one that went jingle jingle, even if you shook it really hard. As Christmas drew near, the people bought lots of toys and stuff, including all the jingle bells, except one. My, there was a whole lot of shaking going on as customers tried out the various bells. They heard the big bells go jingle, jingle, and the medium-sized ones go jingle, jingle, and the littlest jingle bell go jingle, jingle, even if they shook it really hard. Soon all of the big bells and medium-sized bells were gone. Almost all the shoppers commented that the littlest jingle bell was too small. Then Christmas Eve came. Just about all the toys and bells were gone. The jingle bell case was all empty except, you guessed it, for the littlest jingle bell. It had been shaken and shaken by prospective bell buyers, but they felt it was simply too small. How sad that the littlest jingle bell felt so down and out. Tears rolled down its silver face, soiling the little satin ribbon. Feeling like doing anything but ringing, the littlest jingle bell was sobbing himself to sleep. The little toy shop keeper was lowering the blinds, eager to close the store and head home to enjoy the season with family and friends. Just as he was about to lock the door, he heard a clattering noise outside. Why, the little old man heard the hoof beats of reindeer and the unmistakable ho, ho, ho of Santa Claus himself. Chuckling, the little toy shop keeper thought, if Santa is running low on toys, he's come to the wrong store. I feel so sorry for the children of the world, but I'm sold out. About all he had left was the Littlest Jingle Bell. He ushered Santa in, apologizing that the store was a wreck and all the toys were gone. "Oh, I've got plenty of toys," Santa answered, "but a jingle bell fell off my sleigh. Do you have one I could buy?" Imagine how the littlest Jingle Bell's heart jumped for joy. "I'm sorry," the little toy shop keeper replied. "I'm all sold out except one, and I'm afraid you'll think it's too small." "Curses," thought the littlest Jingle Bell. "Let Santa decide. His cash is good, too." "Who knows," Santa countered. "I don't want a bell that will wake up the children when I land on the rooftops. Maybe the one you have left will be just the right one for my sleigh." What a roller coaster this was for the littlest Jingle Bell. Quickly, tears were wiped away, and it gutted up to give out the loudest jingle, jingle possible, hoping that Santa would jingle it like no one had been able to jingle it before. The littlest Jingle Bell imagined how wonderful it would be attached to Santa's sleigh, flying through snowy skies throughout the world. He laughed at the thought of the bigger bells and their humdrum jobs of just hanging on chimneys or Christmas trees in town. Santa approached the shelf of the littlest Jingle Bell. He gave it a hearty shake, and the littlest Jingle Bell went jingle, jingle, just as it always did. Santa, by the way, shook it really hard. Reaching for his beard, Santa stroked it, deep in thought. After a minute or so, he turned to the shopkeeper and said, "You're right, it's too small." And he bounded out of the little toy store looking for a Toys R Us or Walmart open late on Christmas Eve. Two names that I love to hear as often as I can hear them are Dr. Corey and Melinda Hines. I know of no couple better able to lead Howard Payne University at this time. I know of no couple who loves it more than they do. I know of no individual like Corey Hines, who as a freshman seemed so very, no, I'm not going to say that. He showed great potential, but I never dreamed that one day he would be in the presidency of Howard Payne, and I am delighted. One of the most important reasons that I'm delighted is that they both want to be there and only there. I fully believe they have made a lifetime commitment to our school. They're the best. They're Howard Payne to the core and equal to whatever comes next in this pressure cooker world. As a point of personal privilege, I want to thank so many hundreds of people from Howard Payne and throughout the state who have expressed sympathy in loss of our Julie. Your prayerful support for us has greatly helped her husband, Brian, children, Ben and Britton, her sisters, Jana and Jeannie, and of course, Brenda and me. In many ways, we all are victims of COVID-19. And I commend every one of you and everyone at Howard Payne for dealing with this disease with care and confidence, and most of all, faith. 30 years ago, I was privileged to hand a degree to Julie, who went on to serve 29 years in Texas public schools, the last 10 as an assistant principal or principal at McCall Elementary School in Aledo. Pressures accompanying COVID mounted for her and for millions of others, of course, concerning staffing and teaching live or online, and a million more details that had to be dealt with in a short period of time. But she was well organized and fully ready for the school year that was to begin just 2 days after her death. Julie was unashamedly Christian and helped to make a Christian expression popular throughout her school and the community at large. Grace changes things. She believed it, she lived it. The words emblazoned T-shirts and Facebook is awash, showing many evidences of her strong faith. Not everyone knows about the discovery made when her car trunk was emptied. It was filled with food, not for her family, but for delivery to unfortunate folks who lived across the tracks. She embodied one of our important core beliefs as Christians, to give instead of get. We're so proud of that. As we enter the season of Advent, Julie's memory sustains us, and we truly believe that there are angels hovering near, always reminding that the Lord didn't promise us life without storms, but did promise to give us prompt direction, clear direction in getting through the storms. Each Christmas, we're heartened by the reading of a newspaper column, of all things, about angels, written now 53 years ago by one of the greatest newspaper columnists of all time, the late Paul Crum of the Dallas Morning News. His readers there in 1967 were so moved by that column that it has appeared every Christmas day since that time, prominently displayed in the Dallas News. I want to read it. He calls it Angels Among Us. A man wrote me not long ago and asked me what I thought of the theory of angels. I immediately told him that I am highly in favor of angels. As a matter of fact, I'm scared to death of them. Any adult human being with half sense, and some with more, knows that there are angels. If he has ever spent any period in loneliness, where the senses are forced in upon themselves, he has felt the wind from their beating wings and been overwhelmed with the sudden realization of the endless and gigantic dark that exists outside the little candle flame of human knowledge. He has prayed not in the sense that he's asking for something, but that he yielded himself. Angels live daily at our very elbows, and so do demons. And most men at one time or another in their lives have yielded themselves to both and have lived to rejoice and brew their impulses. But the man who has once felt the beat of an angel's wing finds it easy to rejoice at the universe and at his fellow man. It doesn't happen to any man often, and too many of us dismiss it when it does. I remember a time in my final days in college when the chinaberry trees were abloom and the air was sweet with spring blossoms, and I stood still on the street, suddenly struck with the feeling of something that was an enormous promise, and yet was no tangible promise at all. And there was another night in a small boat when the moon was full and the distant headlands were dark but beautiful, and we were lonely. The pull of a nameless emotion was so strong that it filled the atmosphere. The small boy within me cried. Psychiatrists will say that the angel in all this was really within me, not outside, but it makes no difference. There are angels inside us and angels outside, and the one inside is usually the quickest choked. Francis Thompson said it better. He was a late 19th century poet who would put the current crop of hippies to shame. He was on pot all of his life. His pad was always mean and sometimes was just a park bench. He was a mental case and tubercular besides that. He carried a fishing creel into which he dropped the poetry that was later to become considered immortal poetry. The angels keep their ancient places, wrote Francis Thompson in protest. Turn but a stone and start a wing. He was lonely enough to be the constant associate of angels. There's an angel close to you this day. Merry Christmas, and I wish you well. When I think or comment critically about others, I have to remind myself that in so doing, I'm in fact criticizing God Himself. Think of the angels who are tending COVID victims, first responders, hardworking people in many cases have lost their jobs, and of all the hungry people, even in our state of Texas, and almost 100,000 patients in Texas hospitals alone. I want to tell you a little account that you won't read in the newspapers, and by the grace of God and maybe throw some luck in, I know about it. I mentioned earlier that I work with senior adults at our church. I have a friend who is a senior adult director at a Methodist church, maybe 10 miles away, and we talk a time or two a year. And about a month ago, he chanced to call, and I said, "What are you doing about COVID-19? Because most senior activities at most churches anywhere in the world, I suppose, are greatly curtailed." He said, "Well, I have a lot of faith, and I'm using common sense. I'm washing my hands and wearing masks and staying 6 feet from folks when I can." But he said, "I made a very fortuitous phone call in April that's helped me greatly. It was for anyone at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta who'd tell me what to do as a senior adult director at a Methodist church in Fort Worth." The operator said, "Would you hold for a couple of minutes?" And he did, of course, and 2 minutes became 5. But when the voice came on the other end, it was an aged fellow too, maybe 80-ish as he is and I am. Okay, 83 if you want to know specifically. But anyway, he learned very quickly that this man was a very high-ranking person at the Center for Disease Control, and he too directed the senior adult work at his church. They became fast friends. They speak every week and have since that first phone call in April, they have spoken every week of every month. The man there, to catch him up on what comes next, in their opinion, concerning COVID-19. About a month ago when he called me, he said, "My friend said to expect 4 vaccines before the end of December." At that time, there was no vaccine. What's happened since? We have 3 vaccines, and at least another one, in his opinion, that will be available later this month. He said, "We practice common sense, and we are patient people." And when he said that it would probably be March before all Americans who want vaccines will have them, that's not a great price to pay to continue these safeguards for just 3 more months, or roughly that. And that's what he fully believes to be true. There's nothing official about that. It's a comment made by a friend to another friend. But that gives me pause and comfort and a sense of hallelujah about this thing called COVID-19. Wherever you are in this Christmas season, Help others to realize that the same God who has intervened in the affairs of humankind throughout history is still in charge. If you are able to be with loved ones in a few days, share this account about angels and about the Center for Disease Control. And then when they ask what invariably is asked of school children every day when they get home from school, what did you learn today? And those youngsters invariably say, oh, Mother, oh, Dad. Okay, what if they say, what did you learn this semester? Well, tell them you've learned a brand new recipe that if you want to prepare for them, it is so easy and so good. It's the subject of my column for this week, and it appears in the Wednesday edition, this very day in the Brownwood Bulletin. If you don't get the newspaper, go by Jacob Rohr's office in the administration building. He'll be glad to hand you a copy of the column, and while you're there, he'll be happy to show you the latest photos of baby Hudson, which probably will be only minutes or perhaps hours old. And if you fawn over the picture, he'll probably give you 2 copies of the recipe. You'll really shock your folks if you share the lyrics of an 1868 ballad that became a popular song. Religious song, I might add. It's called Whispering Hope, written by Septimus Winter. No telling how many copies it would have sold if he had had a name people could pronounce or understand. Who ever heard of a Septimus? Well, there's one. It's been included in virtually every hymnal published in the last 150 years. It sustains us now, this beautiful hymn, based on Hebrews 6:19. This hope we have is an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence beyond the veil.